What all of this means is quite simply, the world no longer cares how much our students know. Don't care. Knowledge is a commodity. They may know something more than the kid next to them, but if they do, it's for a nanosecond, because the kid next to them will look it up when he or she needs it. What the world cares about is what kids can do with what they know, which is an entirely different education problem. Then the question becomes, not do I have the knowledge, but do I have the skill and do I have the will? So I'm going to talk about skill and will. Skill. In 2005, I read The World is Flat by Thomas Friedman. How many of you have read that book? Good. I'm glad most of you have. I read it because my wife told me to. True story. And I'm glad she did. Although it scared the heck out of me, because it was the first book I had read that really helped me to understand how quickly this world is changing, how rapidly the world of work is changing. And I began to worry about what are the skills our young people are going to need to succeed in this new flat world, in this global knowledge economy. So I started talking to a very wide range of executives, literally, from Apple to Unilever to the US military. I talked to community leaders. I talked to college teachers. I interviewed recent graduates. And asking everyone, what are the skills that matter today? What are the gaps? And I was stunned to learn that there is a virtual consensus about the skills that matter most in today's world. I call them the 7 survival skills for careers, college, and citizenship. Same skills for all 3. Let me briefly describe them to you. Number 1, critical thinking and problem solving. Over and over again, I've come to understand that the leaders in any sector or industry, profit, nonprofit, doesn't matter, actively encourage all of their employees to think continuously about how to improve their product, their process, or their service. But when I asked these executives, what is critical thinking, it got really interesting. Because you know, for us, it's kind of a buzzword. You know, you ask us as educators, well, what's critical thinking? We might say, well, yeah, critical thinking. Well, that's kind of like thinking critically. It's kind of a circular thing. We're not accountable for it. It isn't on the state test yet. We're going to work on that. But you ask these executives, and they're really, really clear. They told me, and it was the most frequent response I got, critical thinking begins with the ability to ask really good questions, to ask the right question. They're more interested in problem formulation than problem solving. Because you formulate the problem correctly, it's far different and easier to solve. Collaboration across networks and leading by influence, number 2. More and more work is being done collaboratively. It's being done virtually. IBM folks told me they brought teams in from around the world, connecting them virtually to work on problems routinely, demanding that you deeply respect differences, cultural, religious, ethnic. But more and more, these teams are led by peers through influence, not by supervisors with positional authority. 2 little problems here. Education is arguably the most isolated profession in modern work life. Most of us work alone all day, not with other adults. Having rarely experienced real teamwork in the workplace, how are we going to teach that to kids? I wonder if, for example, with future fellows, might teams think about applying, not just individuals, a thought for the future. But then the other problem is, how do we ensure that every young person learns to lead peers through influence? Not just those kids who are at the top of the co-curricular activities. Number 3, agility and adaptability. The pace of change, the complexity of problems increasingly favors people who are extremely agile and adaptable. Number 4, initiative and entrepreneurialism. It was Mark Chandler, who was then general counsel and vice president at Cisco Systems, who explained to me how executives of very large companies like his lay awake at night worrying about how to keep that entrepreneurial spirit alive, how to ensure that their organizations don't become ossified and bureaucratic. He said, if I have an employee who sets and meets 5 goals, that's simply no longer good enough. He said, if on the other hand I have an employee who sets 10 stretch goals, but maybe only succeeds at 7 or 8, he or she is a hero. But what would that person be in our schools? Think for a minute. They would have missed 2 or 3 out of 10. C, B student, maybe? I'll come back to this issue of failure. Number 5, effective oral and written communication, and it is the number 1 complaint of both employers and college teachers. It was a senior executive at Dell Computer who said to me, the reason these kids cannot write, in his view, is that they do not know how to think, meaning reason, meaning construct a coherent argument. And he said that was only half the problem. The other half of the problem, he said, and I quote, because it warmed my recovering high school English teacher's heart to hear this. He said, they do not know how to write with voice, meaning they do not know how to put their own passion and perspective into their communications. I'm wondering how many of you from high schools, when was the last time you were asked to write with voice in an assignment, or to speak with passion and perspective? Number 6, accessing and analyzing information. We've just been talking about that, how incredibly important that is. Number 7, curiosity and imagination. Now, how many of you read Dan Pink's last book, A Whole New Mind? Raise your hands. Many of you. It's an interesting book. He makes the argument that the so-called right brain skills, curiosity, imagination, creativity, and empathy, are at least as important as left brain skills in a very sophisticated consumer economy where more and more of us want products that are beautiful, that are aesthetic, that are intuitive and empathetic and so on. But I've come to see the need for curiosity and imagination in a completely different light in the context of my work over the last 3 years, which I'm about to explain.